All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Macro Perspective. And today we are with a new guest, and that guest is Craig McCloskey. And he is going to go ahead and provide some real good insight and details to, the brand that he's representing here today. But obviously, maybe a little bit of personal anecdote and story on how he got there. And so Craig, without further ado, I'm going to maybe give you kind of the floor here to give an elevator pitch as to what it is you do, how you got where you are, and you have 1 minute. Ready, set, go.
I'll make this brief. Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. And so I work for Ancestral Supplements. I've been there over 3 years, and I really kind of started doing a little bit of everything. And a fun fact, so I started there in January of 2022, and when I went through this panel interview, I was this big roundtable interview, flew out from Pennsylvania to Texas to do this interview, and Liver King himself was at the table. First time meeting him because he's the owner of the company. And then all the employees, there was like 12, 14 people around the table, and they all went around and asked me a question. And that was the most intimidating thing, but they liked me enough to bring me back, hire me. And I moved out to Texas to join. And they liked me enough, and they saw my passions and my talents that I actually, for the entirety of 2022, I worked directly for Liver King, built his social media, was his social media PR guy. And then right towards the end of 2022, I transitioned back to Ancestral and really helped blow up their social media. And now I'm really their head of education. So I'm putting out a lot of content on their YouTube, their Instagram, Facebook, stuff like that, and working with creators and affiliates to try and spread the message that, of what we're about. But that's really what I've been doing the past few years.
Well, before Marcos asks his next question, whatever you think of Liver King, Brian Johnson, whatever you think, Craig, you did an amazing job being part of the conduit to get him up there, dude. Like for real, I didn't know that was the story because there's a team behind it, so that's cool, man. That's awesome. That's some good work.
Yeah, I was there with him pretty much every day at his house, just filming the content. Started with him when he was like 30,000 followers, and now he's like 3 million followers. And there's a lot behind him that you don't see on social media, but it was a really cool experience to get to know him, his family, because they're honestly, genuinely like really incredible people. And he's coming out with his Netflix documentary. By the time this episode's out, it's probably already out. But it was a very fun experience. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about the supplement industry as well. And that's where, a lot of my talents lie, are really helping, people transform their health and get to know the ancestral message.
Wow. So I did not know that about you in the background. So are you like more of like the film PR guy? How did you transition to where you're at, if that's where you started?
Yeah. So in college, I went to Penn State, and, kind of backing up a little bit more. I went to Penn State, played a couple of different sports, swimming and baseball. And my freshman year of college, I was really passionate about health and wellness, no more than just like athlete wise, like food can fuel me. I didn't understand more in-depth stuff than that. And so really what shifted this perspective for me, and this will tie into kind of what I did where I'm at now, is that this was February of 2015. I got woken up by my dad because I was commuting to Penn State from my parents' house. And this is like 6 a.m, and my dad comes in, and he basically had the phone in his hand, and he said, "Hey, I just got off the phone with your aunt. Your Uncle Nathan didn't wake up this morning." Found out a few days later that it was a massive heart attack. He was only 43 years old, and he left behind a couple young kids, and he was like a second dad to me. And that really shook me. So that pivotal moment in my life is really what led me to become a nutrition major, because I started making the association that what you eat can influence your health or not. And that really led me to doing outside research outside my university, traveling, to attending live events, spending my rent money to fly across the country just to go to these events and hear keynote speakers, Dr. Mark Hyman and all these other influential leaders in the health space. And it was in 2017, I believe, or 2018, reached the number one health podcast at the time, The Model Health Show. Sean Stevenson, he wrote a couple best-selling books. I was a big fan of his, went to a couple of his live events, and he reached out to me because I was going to his events. He wanted me to work for him as his nutritionist, his social media guy, just kind of manage behind the scene things. And I did that for 4 years up until 2022. And I got a ton of exposure. I got to meet all these incredible guests, Lewis Howes, you could go, the list goes on, right? All these major influencers, and got to work with them, and I got to see these behind the scenes. And so then it really just, I got the in with Ancestral Supplements and just really wanted to up my game with them and take them to the next level. So that's what I've been doing the past few years. And that's kind of kind of what they saw in me.
Okay, are we living like the same life here? Because Craig, like your story, first off, like, sorry for the passing of your uncle who was like a second father to you, and him being so young. It's funny, not funny, but like an interesting parallel, because I lost my stepfather around the same time, kind of going into college, and he was young. He had 4 children, and then it was kind of going down that same list, like going into school, going for kinesiology, and trying to find out what health, but then I had to look outside, because like you have to learn the textbooks because you just have to learn that. But by the time you get out, it's kind of like the market's already moved. There's new things, and then it's funny. I think we may have been at the same like conference for Sean Stevenson, because me and my fiance love him. But no, it's quite interesting. You talk about all these people that are health promoting. Man, that's so cool. And then for you now to be in the ancestral realm is you bring all this knowledge, but you're also bringing like an ancestral tenets to it. Just kind of talking about like the difference of like modernity and what we're missing now, and that's kind of like where you got to now.
Yeah, and that's really what we have at Ancestral Supplements. Is we're not trying. I mean, we sell supplements, but what we're trying to do is sell this lifestyle, and these things are free. We have what are called the 9 ancestral tenets, and really these are all free. This is sleep, eat, move, shield, connect, cold, sun, fight, and bond. And I know I went through those really fast, but literally this is just living in tune with nature and just giving your body things that any living thing expects when you go outside in nature. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just sell people a healthy lifestyle. And what we want people to do is, we talk about organs, beef liver, beef heart, all these organs that are the most nutrient dense parts of the animal, which we can talk more about. But the thing is, I mean, we're not trying to sell these supplements. We want people to go out there and eat fresh food, but a lot of times people don't want to eat organs. So we're just like, hey, we freeze dry these, we put them in capsules, take these are the next best thing to take if you're not going to eat the fresh thing. And people are seeing a lot of incredible results with it. But that's really what we're trying to do at Ancestral Supplements.
What does living an ancestral lifestyle mean to you, though, out of curiosity?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think people have this narrative that, you're carrying around a club, you're just living like a caveman, you want to just be covered in like bed bugs and ticks and all this. That's not what I'm talking about. To me, living an ancestral lifestyle is literally just giving your body the things that it expects. It's getting good sleep in like a nice, cool environment that's not riddled with, blue light from your TV. This is just sleeping as close to like nature as you can. This is eating a fresh food diet that's primarily local, whole foods that you can recognize, limiting ultra processed foods, getting outside in nature, touching your bare skin to the grass, spending more time outdoors and less time under these artificial lights, just connecting with family, all these things that cultures and humans have done, but in the past 200 years, really, we've kind of removed ourselves. We have convenience now more than ever. We have all these fast foods. We have technology that's really taking away our movement. We sit at desk jobs. We don't do all these things that we need to be healthy. So really just living an ancestral life to me is just putting our bodies back in the environment that it expects to be healthy.
I feel like for me, like if I were to define it, it's granted, like, I mean, I call it that, but I feel like as I've kind of fine-tuned how I want to coach people over the last couple of years, and really talking about like this idea of just more activity and the right amount of like resistance training and how to dial in the food, and like kind of the core tenets that Seamus and I have talked about kind of ad nauseum on the podcast, is really like, it really is like having, far more movement than our day-to-day lives typically have. Like I literally tell people, like, if you're not moving with activity about 120 minutes a day, then you're really not living. And then they're like, well, what does that mean? It's like, yeah, that's like 12,000 steps outside of your gym time.
Yeah.
Like, and it feels like such a lofty goal, but like I had to break it down in a call with a group that I'm coaching right now. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like you got 9 hours at work, you have 1 hour of commute time, like what are you doing with the other 5 hours that is your time? Right. And a lot of it's like, well, I'm just like bonding with my family, like sitting in front of a TV is bonding time.
And scrolling on your phone. It's
like the act of just like being present with them feels as though it's enough, but it really isn't. But I mean, this is, well, you're an expecting father, right? And this is probably one of the greatest things that's kind of come about. And I realized this the other day with my daughter. She's about to be 4. And all she wants to do is go ride her scooter. And I feel like the asshole because I have work to do, which involves me sitting my ass down in front of a computer and calling people. Like, dude, it was like the most like almost cringe-worthy comment I think I've ever made. I was like, I'm sorry, I can't go walk with you right now because dad has to get on a phone call and there's no cell service where I live. Like, unfortunately.
Yeah. And at that age, they don't understand.
No, she doesn't. I mean, she does. She's smart, but she's just like, come on. Like, and I like call my mom. I was like, hey, she just wants to go for a walk. Like, just come over, take her out, let her ride the scooter. And my mom was like, I had no idea that your daughter knew where all the parks were. Like, she literally took me right to the dog park. I was like, yeah, like they know, they get to navigate and explore and do all these other things. And to me, it's like that type of living, which involves getting more outdoors and like just becoming more active, is really like, I feel like what the message behind it really is. And I know that like all the Instagram stuff and social media things aside, that was like one of the most like important messages I feel like that came out of that whole run, where Liver King had like that huge prominence. And it was like, dude, like your feed is getting blown up with this guy, and everyone's talking about him circa, what was that, 2 years ago? I feel like, was it like 23, end of 23 into 24?
Something like,
When it like really blew out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like not doubting the approach whatsoever, because he's literally just like, hey, you know, maybe you should do things that involve more activity and just make that fun.
Yeah.
And that's really the lifestyle that he was putting out there, and you know, trying to advocate for just more whole foods, less junk, a more active lifestyle. You even said it. I mean, if you're not moving, you're not living. And it's the same like analogy as like stagnant water breeds disease, and you need a flowing river. You're literally flowing your blood, flowing your lymph fluid. So on all of my meetings, anytime I have meetings with a marketing team or anybody that I'm meeting with, I have a walking treadmill, and I get on here, and we have an hour meeting. And do you have one too?
We all do. I mean,
We all do.
we
I
all do.
literally did 20,000 plus steps already today, because I knew I was going to get on this pod, and I was like, I gotta jump on a walk. Funny aside though, I have a group call on Fridays with my clients, and everybody else was walking except me. And I was like, am I the worst coach right now? Like, is everyone walking, getting sunlight? Like, I'm coaching you guys, but I'm not doing the thing. I feel like an a-hole. And they're like, no, coach, you're good. But no, like the walking meetings, right, Craig?
It's the best thing, because if you're going to be stuck behind a computer for a few hours a day, and I can't necessarily do this when I'm typing, it's harder, but if I'm on meetings, I can knock out, you know, an hour, I can knock out 3 or 4 miles, 6 to 8K steps in an hour. Nothing beats that. And then you just feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so hard, because I think Craig, how old are you?
32.
32. All right. We're all millennials here, right? I think one of the like the changing of the guard of like these old people, and like, again, like undivided attention when it comes to it's almost like a respect thing, right? When you're sitting down just to like listen to whomever it is, it's like, but also we have a million other things that we probably could be doing that might be equally as important. So in order for us to like feel like, hey, I need to get this other thing done for myself, and it's not me not paying attention to you, I could do this other thing. And then when it comes time to like, again, getting to the end of the day and you're analyzing how much movement you've had, and you know that helps you kind of maintain the shape you want, you can go play with your kids instead and not worry about, I need to go accumulate 3,000-4,000 more steps.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not part of something you need to check off. It's just part of like the routine, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I try to coach people all the time. I'm like, you're working 8 hours already. Like, do you really need 8 hours of sitting to do it? And they're like, well, typing is hard, like all this stuff. Like, I'm like, you'll learn. Like, the constraint is you'll learn. Like, you'll figure it out. And like, I've typed, I've done emails, and it's like, it feels so good not having to have this like little guilt thing at the end of the day. It's like 6 p.m. and you're driving home for an hour, right, Marcos, or whatever, patients, clients, and then you're like, man, I still have to get 5,000 steps because my coach said so. It's like, I mean, if you can, just do it with your kids, but like obviously they want to do something else, you know, get it done during work day or something. Yeah,
that's why I'm advocating for daily grace, man. Like daily, something might inevitably happen, and you know, yesterday the priority was taking the kids to the pool, you know, active outside in the sun, about an hour and a half, right? Granted, it felt freezing because of the little bit of the wind chill coming off the water. It was 100 degrees yesterday, Craig, here in Vegas. So it was a perfect pool day, right? Like, and then it's supposed to cool off, but I didn't hit my step goal, and I'm not worried about it because I'm like, you know what, I can make up for it tomorrow, and or I can kind of almost like an investment strategy. It's like, I'm gonna daily cost average this shit, like legit. Like I got 6K yesterday. All right, cool. I'm already at like 12 today. Yeah. Nice. Like, so you just have these abilities to maybe use data and information to like make better decisions long term, and not lose a day. And again, like each day does have some nuance to it. And just because you can't necessarily get the ideal amount of sun exposure and all these other different things because it's just the confines of that day, I do feel like that's a message that most people probably need to hear more of. Like, hey, in doing so, yeah, one bad day is not going to like be like, oh, you're not living the lifestyle anymore. One bad day is supposed to be like, man, I did feel way better if I would have gotten that thing accomplished. So let me make sure I do it. I know. I mean, like you're just saying, going into the supplements, like these supplements could be something from a micronutrient perspective that you're missing out on because maybe you aren't the type of person that likes a lot of diversity of different things. I can point to my kids as a prime example here. My daughter eats things that are rich in omega-3s. My son really doesn't. He doesn't really love fish. My daughter does. Okay, cool. But could I give him something theoretically that he would eventually have that can help boost something that might be a deficiency, right? And then how does he feel? Is his performance with soccer better? And is it, I don't see him eating beef liver anytime soon, personally. But granted, it's also not part of our family culture either, right? Because I know you can have you obviously had that kind of behind the scenes look at what was going on with Liver King, right?
Mhm.
And knowing like, okay, well, if we're all doing this, my kids are going to do it too. And I think part of, ancestry in a sense is that everybody's learning from the previous generation. And a lot of the things that they're missing out on, they don't even know because, oh, my parents just did it that way.
Yeah. But if you go back a few generations, you'll realize that things changed pretty drastically just within maybe like 5 or 6 generations, not that long ago.
Maybe only 2, honestly, like the last 2 generations of
Dude,
family.
2 for sure. Especially if you're immigrated, like Craig, like I'm Filipino, like I'm half, even though I look this way. I'm not gonna shame. Like in the Philippines, like they're still technically a third world country, right?
Mhm.
In 1-2 generations, me and my fiance, we go back then. I think you do like this thing called balut, which is like dug eggs, quail egg, like you do all these different like things, like you eat different things, and they'll eat things in the wild, and it's like my mom moved here and she's like, you don't see none of that ever.
Yeah, and that's something that I talk about on our YouTube channel is I highlight some of these cultures that still are intact with maybe their traditional diets. And these are the foods that we've eaten, when I talk about beef organs or, fish or fish eggs and all these things or the dairy component or just different things. It's like we're being taught that these foods are, to fear them, that they're going to cause all these health issues. But these are the foods that we've eaten for a very long time. But today we're eating all this junk that isn't food, and we're not moving, and it's this perfect storm of issues that's creating disease in humans, and it's why people don't feel well. It's why they don't have energy. It's why they have headaches and why their joints ache. But if you can just kind of break free from that for 30 to 60 days and just give your body the nutrients that it needs and just give it a little bit of movement, 10K steps is probably the bare minimum, right? Like that's like the minimum effective dose. Our ancestors were probably getting a lot more than that. But now people are actually to the point where a lot of people are so unhealthy that 10K steps a day might be a workout for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that realistically, that's what we need. Like you were mentioning, Marcos, is that outside of your gym time, outside of resistance training, is like, you just need to be walking. Like that's what we should be aiming for, is like get all these steps in, but then in addition to working out, that it's a weird time we're living in right now in society.
Well, will AI allow for us to actually be able to do more of this shit, or are we just going to be even more ever consumed as solopreneurs? Is the $1 million question that we're eagerly awaiting here. We've been doing a lot of episodes on that, but this is almost like a step away from that in a sense. But so you mentioned the freeze dried nature of the product delivery system, right? How does that really ensure, and why does it matter for like the health outcomes? Like, I mean, I think everybody probably wants to hear that. Why they choose that mechanism, right? You said it preserves almost 100% of the nutrients. Hell, even just like freezing most like vegetables or fruit also can do the same thing. So obviously it makes sense. And it also probably like neutralizes any like burps or flavors afterwards, right?
Yeah. I don't have any, at least personally, I don't have any burps or weird, like I'm not getting any fish egg burps or liver burps or anything like that.
Yeah.
But in regards to freeze drying, I think about this in terms of like I go hunting with my dad, and we'll butcher a deer, and then we'll come home and we'll make jerky, but we dehydrate it and we'll put the the strips of steak in the dehydrator. That's heating it up to take out the moisture. Well, you're losing some of the nutrients just from heating and cooking it, right? So you're putting like a steak or eggs, you're just naturally going to lose some of the nutrients just by heating it up. Well, freeze drying, it's a gentle process of removing the moisture from it. So you're removing 99.9% of the moisture. So it's turned into this powder. So where moisture is bacteria and pathogens. So when you're removing the moisture, this has a long shelf life, but it's not coming with pathogens or bacteria that could harm you. So you're removing that piece of it. But then you're also preserving a lot of the nutrients because you're literally just freezing the liver. I had an email from a coworker the other day, and she literally showed me like the process of how this was. You're taking a whole liver from a grass-fed, grass-finished cow in New Zealand, and you're putting it in a freeze-drying process, and it takes minutes, and it's just out the door, and then you encapsulate it because it's this fine powder. And there's clinical studies showing like this is that effective. It still has most of the nutrition, the vitamins, the minerals, the cofactors, the enzymes, all the stuff that you would be getting in the fresh food, but you're just taking it in a capsule and you really can't taste it at all.
Yeah.
Does it, so when you're doing the process of freeze drying in this scenario, would there technically be some substantial caloric load? Like it's shrinking it down? No, like would you?
Well, because you're removing most of the moisture, and a lot of the tissue is
It's
water.
water.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think a serving size of 6 capsules is like 5 calories. But
That
that's
is good.
one ounce of liver. So if you took like a whole bottle, I don't know what the caloric equivalent of that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Well, what? So is okay. 1 ounce meaning like a 1 ounce sliver being sucked down into 6 normal size capsules, right? Like whatever, like
Hmm.
a tradition, whatever the size is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what does 1 ounce of liver typically have? So you remove what 95% of the calories through freeze drying, essentially, but retain nutrient.
Yeah, I'd guess that probably has like 60 calories. I don't have, the charts in front of me, but yeah,
Yeah.
you're probably removing most.
Yeah. I've never thought about it. I feel like so in the process of that, is that like liquid nitrogen that gets it there? Like, what does that look like?
I'm not sure exactly if it's liquid nitrogen. I haven't been there in person to see the process, although that's on my list to go and see some of these factories. I know our one of our teams, our supply chain team, has gone there and seen this, so that would be like a question for them to see exactly how that works. But yeah, it's a pretty cool process that a lot of companies use. This isn't exclusive to ancestral supplements, but a lot of companies are using, freeze
Yeah.
drying, whether that's like a colostrum or another form of food that you're trying to turn into a powder.
Interesting.
Talking about like the freeze drying and kind of like the liver being like one of the biggest, obviously like the biggest like mainstays and key figures in the supplement. What has been a surprising supplement line that's been doing well for you guys that like was something that you wanted to try out, test, or were surprised by in the ancestral living? Like what was the market craving, you know?
Probably our Fem. This is a female enhancement mixture. And to be honest, the marketing of this product right now is not the best for us. It's black bottle, this pink lettering, but it doesn't look that appealing to women because it's targeted towards women. But it has, I think, liver, and then it has the female reproductive organs of cows, ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, I believe. And this has so many incredible reviews on Amazon. You can just go and check them out. But women are saying like, hey, this has helped regulate my cycle. This has helped me become pregnant, fertility. It's incredible what this has done. And this is a surprising fact for us. I mean, at Ancestral, 70% of our audience are females, the moms of the household that are buying the supplements, that are going and making most of the health conscious decisions for their kids and, all that. And that's probably been the most surprising product that we've put out. That one, and then thyroid. We have desiccated thyroid that, a lot of individuals, and, I got to be careful what I say, but there have been a lot of individuals that have Hashimoto's or an underactive thyroid condition, and they work with their doctor to start taking this and get off their, synthetic Synthroid or whatever. And they've successfully, thousands upon thousands of customers have successfully transitioned from taking the synthetic medication to now taking a whole food supplement that has helped them, and they feel a lot better and they're
That's
living a
so
lot
cool
healthier.
that you guys
Yeah.
do beef, the bovine, desiccated thyroid, as opposed to like it's mostly been like pig thyroid that most people use or something like that.
Yeah. It's beef, and then I think our thymus is sheep.
That is so cool, and it's all from New Zealand, which is great because I feel like the best the best grass fed stuff is from New Zealand nowadays. So that's a good sourcing. So you guys aren't cutting out on costs. Like you guys are really putting in like the best product line that you possibly can. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's all from New Zealand, grass fed, grass finished. They have a lot of stricter laws over there in regards to whether antibiotics or GMOs or vaccines. And then again, the supplement industry is not very well regulated. So we want to make sure that it's third party tested. That way, it's not just us saying this, that there's other companies, there's an organization out there that's literally saying that this is free of pathogens, it's free of heavy metals, free of anything nefarious in there that is, we don't want in there, but it's just what's on the label.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's like really good stuff. I mean, I personally, I know my fiance, she was the one that kind of introduced me more into like hey, try out the beef liver, the organs and stuff like that. Cause I haven't necessarily gone into the organs themselves, but as a supplement, I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely give it a shot. I know that I did have some beef liver, like protein bar or something like that. And man, my energy was up. So I definitely felt like the rest of the day, I was like, I'm on fire for a little bit. Like, it definitely makes you feel some type of way. And I think that just like comes to the fact that maybe you're just missing some of those nutrients or just not getting at those doses.
Funny story. When I first started getting into my health journey, this is 2016. So 2015, I lost my uncle. So then like that whole year after that, I was just really trying to learn as much as I could. And that's when I learned about organs and how they're the most nutrient dense food. So I grew up hunting with my dad, but that year when I went in November of 2016, I shot my buck, but I wanted to honor that animal, and I kept virtually every part. I kept the liver, the heart, all the, everything, not just the muscle meat. And I came home and I had that liver. I shared it with my dog at the time, and I cut it up into these little chunks, and I just swallowed it with water, like 1 ounce portions. And I'm not joking when I say I had this biggest buzz that I've ever had in my life when I had this raw liver. And people are probably like, if they've never heard this before, they're probably grossed out thinking, why would you do that? Well, I mean, I've never probably had liver in my life up until that point. I was early 20s, and I was probably so deficient in some of these nutrients that sudden influx of beef liver just gave my body all these nutrients. Now I eat beef liver every day for the most part, 5-6 days out of the week, and I don't feel that. It was that early stage, and that's what people say, is that when they have this, they have all this energy. Maybe they get a buzz, or it just depends.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think, what's interesting is, like, I think with modernity and just kind of like what has been fed to our generation, and kind of just like what nutrition has been from like the government and education and school, and like if you weren't really like exposed to it, they never talked about organs. Like they just kind of like were like, yeah, you eat meat, but you never eat the full variety of the meat. But it's like, I grew up in the Philippines for some time. We did everything. Like, we didn't waste anything, I remember my mom, like, so in Asian cultures, this is what happens. Head of the table gets the fish eyes. What the fuck? People today be like, what the fuck? You eat fish eyes? Like, what? Like, they trip on that,
Yeah, if you go back to the Titanic and the menu that they had on the ship in 1912, it had beef organs, like, whether that was liver or different forms of offal, is what beef organs is, offal, OFFAL. It had organs on the menu, and today people will look at that. We don't have that. You have to go to some fancy restaurant, you might see caviar, which is fish eggs. So,
yeah.
But we don't have that in our culture today.
Yeah. I think maybe moving the conversation, like, from just the supplements, but just like looking at the culture of like ancestral culture, like how bringing that in. I know we talk about movement and stuff like that, but I think when it comes to nutrition, what is it that when you look at the culture nowadays, on top of the movement, the nutrition, the supplementation, right? What is else that ancestral living can kind of bring in that we may be missing in our day to day? What else do you think there is?
In terms of nutrition in particular?
No, like, we can move from nutrition. We can continue that too. But like, from the movement to the nutrition, anything else that you've seen that, is missing in our day to day?
There's so much. I mean, like I mentioned, the 9 ancestral tenets, we could go through those. The first one is sleep. And, it's just people are not sleeping well at all. And I'd argue that sleep is maybe more important than most other health pillars, in our lives. And it controls so much. It controls weight loss or weight gain, your recovery. It cleanses out your brain. If you want to, just feel better, it actually has this cerebral spinal fluid in there. And this is, your brain cells actually shrink it's like 30%, I believe, at night when you're getting in deep rejuvenative sleep. So that way that's fluid in there can slosh around and just clear out, the amyloid plaque buildup in there. So if people aren't sleeping well, they're leaving the lights on, stuff like that. They're nutrient deficient, which can inhibit them from getting deep sleep and into their REM sleep. So that's one facet of health that we could, have an entire show dedicated to. But then there's other components, the connecting to nature. There's a lot of science showing that grounding and just connecting to the earth and getting in lakes and oceans and anything like that can help with joint pain, inflammation, energy levels, blood circulation, blood pressure. A lot of cool science there. Bonding with family and friends. I mean, you look at the blue zones, and I have my reservations for the blue zones. They do a lot of things right, but I don't believe it's primarily because they eat a plant-based diet. They're including a lot of organs and eating animals nose to tail. But if there's one thing that they do really well, is that they have a sense of purpose, and they're bonding with their family. They have really a close-knit community. And this is funny because in 2019, I went with my wife to visit her great grandmother, who turned 100 in 2019. Well, she just is celebrating her 106th birthday this upcoming October, and she's still living independently,
Centenarian.
still cooking
Living
her own
independently?
food. Yeah, she doesn't need anyone to take care of her. And she's living here in America, doing the same things that we do. But on her 100th birthday, I asked her, I said, I need to know your secrets. Like, what did you do that got you to where you're at, healthfully? And she gave us like 5 or 6 tips. And she said, I always stored my food in glass. I always cooked my food myself, and I used like Whole Foods, basically, is what she said. She walked to the library, keyword walked, and then she read a book a day or a week or whatever she said. And then she said she lived a low stress lifestyle. because her husband primarily worked and she just was more carefree. And those were her tips to living a long, healthy lifestyle. And just by talking to her and looking at some centenarians in the blue zones, you can see they have a strong sense of purpose and community. Well, today, I mean, it's completely different, and people are stressed out about their cell phone bill or anything like that. And it's, like I said it before, it's a perfect storm that's creating a lot of ill health in us.
Yeah, the mental health side of things for a lot of the different dynamics that go on in today's society are very interesting. And I won't go into the details of what happened today, but just a conversation with somebody else was talking about how their mental strain of all the stuff that's going on, like literally makes them feel as though they're not doing things correctly, even though it's like there's just certain systems that are in play in modern world that just don't make sense. And I know I'm being very vague. I don't want to call attention to that person. I know she's not listening to this, but it's even still just to respect what was said. But it made me realize too, I was like, shit, like purpose, meaning, community. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things is just like community in general, and that purpose of like being around other people that are like-minded, that want to focus on things. And obviously I would feel like the ancestral community as a whole, right? People that are probably posting all those experiences with your products or doing the tenants in a particular way, I feel like as though, shoot, I mean, that's incredibly valuable. And if more people then come in and join along and they kind of, I'm sure from the outside looking in it, there's like a preconceived notion based off of whatever. Maybe they feel like they're not good enough, or maybe they think that cost is a barrier to entry, but you're like, hey, what's a supplement really supposed to do? Hey, you could go buy this stuff at the store and try it. And if you're like, I don't really know if I know I feel a difference, but I really can't stomach the taste because I'm not used to it. Boom, in steps like a solution to your problem. It's as if you could do it every day because you can't really work it into everything. And that kind of leads me to my next question. Like, so you're about to be a father, right, man? So like super exciting. How would you go about like including some of these things? You're obviously not going to have an easy time, feeding a supplement and a pill to a baby, but like as they start going through food phases, like what are maybe some key aspects of like these micronutrient dense type foods to be integrated? Like how would you go about doing it?
That's a really good question, and something that my wife and I have been looking more into lately, and had the opportunity to interview Lily Nichols, who's a dietitian. I had her on the Ancestral's YouTube channel. She has 2 incredible books, Real Food for Pregnancy, Real Food for Fertility. Both of those are wealth of books. So anyone listening, check those out. They're super knowledgeable about this in particular. So she's helped us a lot in regards to, what foods to eat for fertility and for my wife during pregnancy and then postpartum, and what to feed our kids. So we're not at that point yet. Our kid's not due for a few more months, but something we've been researching. Definitely, God willing, we want to make sure that our baby boy's breastfed, because that's, hands down the most nutrient dense food that any living thing, any mammal can have. The colostrum within the first few days after birth, have that. And then once we start weaning off that, whether that's a year long or however long he wants to be breastfed for, then, trying to transition to adjusting his palate with these whole foods, because I think that's a lot of the problem in our society today is that, our palates, at least mine, when I was a kid, I was eating Cheetos and Oreos and whatever else that we can have, of course, but when our palates aren't adjusted to these whole foods at an early stage, when it comes time when we're 15, 20, 30 years old, you're not gonna like liver. It's just not a thing. But if you start eating that when you're young, I'm sure your palate will adjust early and you'll actually enjoy eating it, right? So how we go about introducing those, that's we're gonna find out, and we'll find out firsthand whether he can eat some of these things.
That's gonna be pretty cool.
Take it from me as a parent who we felt some type of way with our first, and my wife basically practically exclusively breastfed for like 2 years. Crazy, I know, like almost unheard of in today's society. And I also don't mean pumping either. We didn't start integrating foods early enough in my eyes. We kind of put it off because it was like easy and convenient to kind of temper the emotions of my son, who's like sitting right next to me right now. But looking back, and then for our second one, we're like, okay, we need to like just let her play with food like regularly at a young age. And like, even though you can't digest it, at least then like whether it's taste, texture or whatever, those types of, like you just said, like they're used to it. Our son wasn't used to it. And now it's like a very limited selection of primarily like real shit, which I'm not mad about, but it's very limited. It's like, dude, I would have loved you to have tried more things. And I think he will, because again, we're going to expose him to lots of whole foods and like, just different situations, but getting it done early. And honestly, like almost microdosing some of the ones that are the typical problematic foods to see how they respond in like the smallest, tiniest amount. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the whatever brand it is that does like microdosing of like peanuts and all the like really common allergens. I forget it offhand, but you could look up like microdosing foods for kids and like just getting that exposure, because both my kids have like particular allergies. And I think it's because in the processing of everything else, or the convenience that's available nowadays, they miss out on building an immune system to those things, right? So both my son's peanut allergy, my daughter definitely walnut. We definitely don't want to like give her anything else, but we had Craig, you know what a kolache is? You ever had one of those?
No.
Oh, you went to Penn State and they don't have a kolache nearby? Okay. So basically it's a nut roll. So it's like a cinnamon roll, but like with nuts. So the innards are, cinnamon, you grind up walnuts, and then you have like sugar with it. So we gave my daughter a bite during Christmas this year, and her tongue blew up. And I was like, my wife's like, do you think she's having an allergy reaction? I was like, no, she's fine. Let her suck her tongue out. And I was like, oh no, yeah, she's fucking having a straight up like allergic reaction.
Dang.
So here we are as parents, with a 3.5-year-old, and we're like, did we fuck up because we didn't expose more of these things, to create enough diversity early on?
Really good point. Yeah, it's a really good point.
I mean, the earlier the better in my eyes. Like, and honestly, and for everybody listening there, like when a pediatrician asks a nutrition coach for their advice, yet they're supposed to be the experts with kids, I immediately knew we have a problem, right?
No way, Marcos. No fucking way.
I know. It's like, well, what do you think? It's like, well, you probably have more knowledge about this than I do. And I was like, oh, fuck. And my wife does not want to hear this, that I was probably right, because I spend all of my time talking to people and getting insight. So as not a healthcare provider, but as a health and wellness professional, get exposure early and often so that you can see what happens, and probably keep some Benadryl or an EpiPen nearby as you do introduce things. But dude, you would much rather know early on than later, because now we're like, fuck, like what if,
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's all of our first times going through this too, first time doing everything. And so it can be scary.
That's why I'm trying to target more parents and have like conversations with them, and first time or expecting, or people that are working with it, and the ability to like, again, like you said, like you can't say particular claims. We get that, but anecdotally, right? Anecdotally, you feel some type of way after you've used it. I know exactly that euphoria that you're mentioning too. First time I had some beef after a while, I was like, dude, like, I had an ounce of this shit and I'm like full. Like, it was like weird. I was like, oh, maybe there's some GLP-1 like that's missing. That it could be literally from that. And now it gets me thinking, like, man, maybe I should find, there's some, Seamus, you ever had that? I think Jason mentions it, like the ancestral blends of like the ground beef.
Yes, I've had some ancestral blends. I've also had the ancestral, like, not this company, but like, I just went to Whole Foods or Sprouts or something that had like freeze dried like protein powder, and it had like all the different things in there as well. It's pretty good. I like it's like a bone broth protein powder, which honestly, interestingly enough, Craig, so like I coach a bunch of people, and I've worked with a lot of plant-based type people, like vegan or vegetarian or whatever. And quite frankly, they're like, I'd rather do the bone broth protein as opposed to like a plant-based protein. It just blends so much better. It tastes better, and they feel amazing on it. And I'm like, yeah, it's because you're not getting those nutrients at all. And they're comfortable with it, because like, I guess with some people's beliefs around like plant-based, they're like, well, it's just bone broth, So I'm like, yeah, like I guess
it's an easier onboard for that population if you're primarily plant-based, slowly transitioning to including a little bit more animal-based foods in your life. Bone broth is an easy onboarding food.
It really is. And it's super good. Talking about like immune system. I mean, like anytime I get sick, it's bone broth and garlic. Lock that in. I feel great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's, a lot of ancestral wisdom when it comes to, our bodies just wanting, broth. I mean, soups, but, now we have it in powder protein supplement form. But, historically, we didn't, when we were sick or we didn't feel that good, we wanted to fast a little bit. Maybe we didn't want to bring in a lot of food that was going to use a lot of energy. We needed that energy to heal. So we would do a lot of soups and broths. And historically, it wasn't Campbell's chicken noodle soup. It was bone broth that we would use the entire animal, probably some herbs and spices in there. And, that was healing foods that had a lot of good connective tissue, enzymes, and all that good stuff in there that's, going to help repair your body, heal your gut, and boost the immune system.
Yeah. I mean, think when I was listening to you earlier, Craig, just to get your cadence in my ears. You'd said that about the the collagen and the bone broth and all the stuff. I think it was like aligned with one of the tenets. I forget which one. And then you were also making a comment about like soda for healing. You know what I mean? Like I laughed. I was like, "Ha, yeah, dude, ginger ale. Like there's not a fucking ounce of ginger in it
I'm
anymore."
laughing because we're talking about ancestral supplements and like ancestral things. I'm over here with the freaking Coke Zero. I'm like, today was probably not the best day to bring this.
Well, hey, you know what? Like, let that be maybe 80-20, 90-10, whatever variation you would want to be. I mean, again, to not enjoy some of the nuances of modern times would be, I mean, again, I don't want to live life kind of not enjoying it. So,
Yeah.
People keep on asking me like, what's your stance on this? And asking this in a group setting. And I'm like, I mean, I also enjoy it, but when my wife calls me out because I'm going a little ham on it, I was like, yeah, maybe I should slow it down or not buy another case for a little bit or whatever. Again, I feel like the nuance is balance. And I know that like, where do you stand, Craig? Are you like 100% like you don't drink a diet soda every now and again, or do you have a little bit of balance every now and again?
I definitely have balance. I don't drink diet sodas. I just personally, I grew up drinking Mountain Dew. I love that, but I just kind of cut that off. But, to say like I won't have a seed oil or something, that's just not true. Because I talk about all this stuff on my social media. And so people think I'm so extreme. But like if you see my stories, you might see that I'm eating French fries when I go out or whatever, like occasionally. Yeah. It's not going to be like an everyday or even every week thing. Like I was that way for a few years when I first started this. I was like, I'm all or nothing kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that got unhealthy very fast. And I realized, it's okay to have these things. You can say yes to some of these things. Like I'll go to my family's house. I might have an Oreo or two, but I'm not going to like eat the whole bag. I have that kind of willpower to be able to say no. I'm not bringing a lot of that stuff inside my home just because I know if we do that, we're not having structure here. And this, this is up for debate and, interpretation and everything, but society's not creating structure for us. And this is my opinion. When you can go out there and there's literally a free for all of anything and everything food wise, fast food in the grocery stores, there's no structure. So I'm just trying to create a little bit of structure inside my home to where that's not there. So that way I know like if I get hungry or hangry or something, I'm not going to gravitate towards like unhealthy junk food. If I want some of those things, I try and find a healthier alternative, or maybe my wife and I try and make it ourselves using better quality ingredients. But no, if I'm going out, like, yeah, I might have some whatever, it just
it's crazy. I was talking about this in this group call last week too, Craig, where everyone was walking except me. It is so easy to, if you're not even a health conscious person, even a health conscious person like me, it's so easy to be inundated with, and just all this stuff is in your face. Convenience is at an all-time high, but it's like a double-edged sword. It's nice to have that convenience. I love having Instacart, send stuff to my house or, whatever. But, just driving from work to home, I'm like, how many McDonald's, how many Starbuckses, how many like different fast food places did I pass? And again, not to dime on them and bag on like, hey, these are just options that are out there for the consumer. The consumer commands the market, truly 100%, right? Obviously these companies have a stake and they're putting this out there and it's laissez-faire, but it's true. Like when you go out into the real world, especially if you're hungry and you've had a long day and willpower is not at an all-time high, you're a human being. You might lose that battle. Mm-hmm. Even if you have the best values of like, I do want to be healthy and I want to be as healthy as I possibly can and be healthy for my family. Maybe there is a better alternative, or maybe, find a different way. So I do agree. I think it's like finding that structure in your home is going to be super powerful, how you do it in your home. And yeah, if you have some things and it's just a little bit of that convenience one today. I mean, I think Marcos says it the best. Is it today or is it maybe the week, the overall month progress, as opposed to, if we quote unquote ruin a moment as we coach, I'm like, nah, just that happens. It's built into the plan, 80-20, 90-10. Mm-hmm. Move forward. What does the next day look like? If you harp on it, if I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, is it a cheat meal or a cheat weekend, mm-hmm. right? Like, is it a treat meal or is it like a treat weekend? Because you can mm-hmm. have that thing Friday night, but if you go off the rails and decide, you know what, it's Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, I'll just start Monday. That's when it's a problem. You have the ability to make the decision now to go, you know what, I had dinner, I went out with friends, had some dessert. Okay, cool. Just go back to it tomorrow.
Yeah, you gotta, I think, find your, at least for me, like my gateway foods. If I know if I'm going to be in an environment that I'm having, I'm going to be surrounded by some of these foods, and maybe it's harder for me to not, because they're not full of protein. A lot of these foods that are easy to overeat, they're full of carrageenan or MSG, monosodium glutamate. It's full of these things that cause us to overeat. And, if I'm in an environment like that, then it's just easier for me to overeat these things. So finding like your gateway foods, like what are your trigger foods, things like that, and then who are your trigger people? Like, are you hanging out with
Yeah.
friends and family, and when you hang out with them, you're going to have a certain drink, you're going to have a certain food. You got to like find these situations.
Marcos, you got to say your line, man. You got to say your line about like how hard you went in that one class. Remember, like how you coach. You got to hear this, Craig. You got to hear this.
Well, shit, dude. That actually is a perfect thing to say today. Granted, as we drop this episode, we dropped another episode that the guy mentioned was Joe, right? Joe Hoy.
Mm-hmm.
He said something that was very polarizing in one of these initial like kickoff things that he did. And it was like, either these people are going to love me or they're going to hate me. And I said the thing that would literally make them hate me more, but also the people that would love me to love me more. And so this person, I asked that exact question, Craig, I go, we're role playing. And I like hurt this person's feelings in role playing, mind you. And I was like, okay, so scenario is you're hanging around with a group of friends and they're all slightly overweight or they're overweight and they're out drinking. And, as like, have you considered who you're hanging out with as potential reasons why? I said, well, like, you can't ask me to leave my friends. I was like, I'm not saying you have to leave them, but would you consider going somewhere else? Would you consider going and like changing your surroundings? And they're like, I don't know. And I feel attacked. And I was like, and I literally said this to actually did say this to a client. And I was like, if you don't mind me asking, what do your parents look like? And then she's, no. I guess she's thinking, hard pause. And she like literally sat there for about a minute and she's like, come to think of it, I can't think of one family member that isn't obese. And I was like, so why are you going to take advice from them? Because obviously it's working really well, and it was a hard polarizing moment of me like calling this person out of like, you're telling me that you got health advice about like oils and fats being included from the people that you cannot even say to me that are healthy. You're trying to avoid that. So I'm over here telling you, hey, let's pay attention and look at your dietary fat intake, right? And not overdo it and have the right amounts of it so that you can get to the outcome you want. And point in case, it was like, I don't try to like demonize fats, but I like people to know it's really easy to overconsume it. Yeah. And if your goal is to look a certain way, you need to pay mind to that and learn how much is getting snuck in everywhere. Like you just said, the more processed something might be, the more likely you have 8, 12, 15, 20 grams per serving, whatever it is. And I think you even mentioned on the other episode we listened to, Seamus gave me homework. You mentioned that the idea behind that and understanding like just the use of better oils, right? Mm-hmm. And those things. And, I know we don't have like definitive proof that we had Alan Aragon on and said like, there was no difference between like, again, ultra processed seed oil and like that. And I'm like, yeah, but like, if I'm going to hedge my bet, I'm going to look at the population size and the population studies and say that chances are that those things are likely culprits to lead to the overconsumption, much like the MSG, right? Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to have a choice of eating the healthier items, I'm going to go for it. So yeah, like asking people to like look at like their environment, their family as a potential place that like there's a shortcoming is really hard. And it sucks because like you just said, like you might have to just eliminate certain groups of people or cut them out a little bit more or cut it back. But I have so much fun with them.
Yeah. Craig, you make a great point. I think we talk about community. I think people, we talk about fitness, nutrition, and movement, but like community is such a big part. Like, Marcos and I look at longevity and health span markers all the time. VO2 max, DEXA scan, brain, cognitive health. But it is so funny that out of all that data, even if you stack it against like how you grew up, who you grew up with, your beliefs, your environment, like I think that actually plays such a more pivotal role as opposed to like, oh yeah, I can sprint, like. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like those people, like especially like in Sardinia, for example, it's like these centenarians, it's like these people are looking out for them. They're making good food for them. They're like, are you going to your doctor's appointments? Are you making sure to exercise? You're doing all these things because community, especially a community that, yes, has empathy, but compassion and accountability, right? Like, which is what we try to do as coaches is like, look, we're just trying to hold up a mirror. You said you wanted this goal. I'm trying to get you there, but I got to show you the reality. And I'm not trying to be an a-hole about it. I know Marcos is trying to be an a-hole about it when we coach. But it's funny because it's like we say some things just to show you what a glaring fact is. You may be in your life so much that objectively you cannot see it.
Yeah.
And we as the coaches are like, look, like, you made a lot of changes in your fitness and nutrition, but man, this environment, I know it's your family, it's all this, but maybe there's some boundaries that need to be made happen. And it's weird because as a health professional, as a coach, a lot of my conversations aren't fitness and nutrition anymore. It's more like what's going on with your identity, like a little bit, like what's going on with your boundaries. Because if food is so ingrained in that person's culture. It's like, well, it was this party this weekend, it was this birthday that month, it was this wedding, and it's like we all have those. And Marco says it best. There's going out, and then there's events. Like, are you always going out and just eating whatever? Or are you saving some of that budget for events or something?
Saving you for your wedding.
Coming up. That's such a good point. You mentioned identity, and that is so, that's, people have this vision about themselves. Some people maybe don't even realize they picture themselves a certain way, but then the people that have this strong belief system, and it's hard to break free from that sometimes. And maybe they're surrounding themselves, like you're mentioning, like around people that have this same belief system, same identity. Everybody wants to belong to a tribe. Everybody wants to belong somewhere, and it can feel scary to leave that for something else. So having that strong support system when you do choose to leave an unhealthy environment, an unhealthy friend group, you got to have that. And it can be hard at first. You're putting yourself outside your comfort zone. But after a while, a few weeks, couple months, as long as you have a good support system and you're surrounding yourself with other healthy individuals, you're going to transform and you're going to adopt a new identity. You're going to feel better, because people probably don't even realize, like, they're feeling a normal, and they're not even realizing, like, that normal isn't normal. Right? Like they're feeling so unhealthy that they didn't realize that they were feeling unhealthy.
I think someone said this best. It was like, even though something can be consistent, obesity being like over 50% now, even though it is the average, it is still an abnormality. It was something like that along those lines. It was like a very good quote. I was like, fuck, that makes sense.
Yeah, I got to write that down quick so I don't forget it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like, even though it's above the norm, it's still an abnormality. It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. The environment, the identity, all those things. It's like part of my identity has always been like wanting to be nomadic. Like, I like the idea of going into different places and environments constantly, because it's like you're constantly never getting like too stuck on one thing, but you're trying to look at how to like move and find the similarities amongst all the things. So it's trying to keep an open mind.
Yeah, to what Seamus said, that it's an abnormality. There's the quote, I can't remember who said it, but it's no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. It's no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. I don't want to be well adjusted to this society, because this society is so sick. I'm trying to get back to my roots and start living just a healthier lifestyle. That just means, like, waking up, drinking some water, going outside, letting morning sun in my eyes, not trying to bombard my body with caffeine or just like looking at my phone first thing. Easier said than done, but like, I want to go out, get a little bit of sun in my eyes, get a little bit of movement in, maybe get a few thousand steps in the first hour of the day. I like to go in my cold plunge, wake up a little bit, do that, get some earth, touch the ground, do these things, set my day up for success. And that way I'm feeling good throughout the day. That's my normal. That's my society. That's what I'm trying to create. I'm not trying to, make it a habit to go to fast food, 5 times out of the week. Every once in a while, cool. But it's not the society I want to be adapted to.
I think I would love to kind of push here, because we're going to get to an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time, Craig. I know you got to be up early tomorrow for something, but I think maybe one thing we could push in, because we talked about identity and some of these things, purpose. Let's talk about purpose. What can you define as purpose as a way of living? And how do you define purpose for yourself, and what does that look like in this season of your life?
Man, that's such a really good question, powerful question. Framing it like this, I think purpose is everything. You see, grandparents or an old couple, and I've had this example in my life. I've had many great grandparents and grandparents. When one passes, a month or two or less than a year later, the other one passes. And that happened with my great grandparents. Why is that? It's their literal identity, their purpose was tied to that person. Their person they spent 40, 50, 60 years with. And purpose is literally everything. And when you're spending that amount of time in that belief system, and then your entire purpose just kind of leaves you. Another good example, retirement. And it's cool to have, retirement set up, you want to have, your 401k, whatever. In our society, it creates stability. It creates certainty for us in the future that we'll have this stability. But when you retire, you literally, everything you worked for 40 or 50 years, literally you have no purpose anymore. And it's like people, you go crazy, and then all of a sudden you go downhill. And it's like, why does that happen? Because you literally have nothing left. So you need to keep that sense of purpose. So if I retire and, use my 401k, whatever, when I'm 65 or whatever, like I'm still that person now that I'm going to try and really find that sense of purpose in my life. I still want to make sure that I'm giving and contributing to the world.
Yeah.
Bob Proctor, who passed away, I believe, last year, said it best, but he was well into his 80s or 90s, and he was still getting up on stage and speaking and preaching this lifestyle. And he didn't retire. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to share in my life is, don't retire, but if you want to retire, but don't retire your purpose is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Marcos, I'm going to say serendipitous here because Marcos is about to say something, I can tell you.
Oh, it's a closed circle moment right there on all the podcast episodes, man. We had one of the guys that's been the head of was previously the head of the Bob Proctor thing on. His name is DP Gates, and he kind of spearheaded a lot of motivation in us when we first got started over 2 years ago. So it's just funny that you're also mentioning that after just everything. So I'm chuckling because I know Seamus is like, it's funny how all these things end up aligning and tying together at some point. It's like you said, purpose. I mean, dude, my parents are literally retiring in 2 weeks. So yeah, I mean, they retired once, but then they teachers, so they went back and did it again. But now it's like, we're done. We're sick of the kids, education's a shit show, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, I've told you this, but I'm over here just like trying to help them find that next purpose, and part of it can be my kids and the grandkids and the next generation and helping them out through wisdom. But the other part of it is definitely, like you just said, like finding that other thing that kind of keeps you entrenched in your mind working. And Seamus and I've had the pleasure of being around tons of successful entrepreneurs for our other jobs. And they all kind of say the same thing. They're like, the only time you're getting me out here is in a box. I will always
sword. That's what everyone says. I'm dying on my sword. Everyone says like the way I'm gonna die is my perfect day. I'm like, wake up, do my thing, and then die. I was like, oh, sounds good.
Yeah, but I didn't understand it at 24 when I first started this job, or 25.
Same.
How old was I? Whatever it was. Like I didn't understand it. I was like, what? Like you don't have that in your head. But now as I'm getting older, I'm like, it's going to be really hard to remove myself from my purpose. And the more I keep on going into that thing, the more I get to impact the reason why I got started. And again, like you said it so perfectly, like you can't retire from that. You have to always kind of find a way to kind of stoke that. And whether it's eventually graduating to a level of mentorship for the next generation and learning from them and like just being intrigued by, I can only imagine what people and how they will think in 40 years will look like. Like it's going to blow our freaking minds away. Hell, we might have AI cyborgs walking around, but nonetheless, like the thoughts and the curiosity of where everything's going is super interesting. And man, dude, thank you for such a great time today and letting us kind of delve into some like just obscure things relating to it and not just hopefully make it like the same old bump and grind of like preaching exactly the lifestyle that we both preach already. We know came in, we're like, okay, this is our people, right? Like got the background to obviously help promote those things. And damn, I wanted to have like a segue into like Sean Stevenson's book with his cookbook, because I feel like that was like another great tie-in that we didn't really get to touch much on. I know you kind of like briefly dropped
maybe
that.
We save it for after the pod. I got something, maybe Marcos, maybe we'll do
okay.
a little.
Yeah. But yeah, Craig, if you want to give like some closing remarks real quick, just kind of where everybody can find you and all those details, and then we'll wrap it up.
Absolutely. So you can find me. I'm most active on Instagram at Craig_McCloskey. I'm head of education on Ancestral, so you can find us at Ancestral Supplements. And that's pretty much it. That's where I'm most active.
All right, guys. Well, that's all going to be listed in the show notes. Seamus, you can take us away for the end.
Yeah. Thanks so much. It was a great episode. I think, whatever it is that you're dealing with, take some of these tenets with you. Whether you got to move a little bit more, just be active a bit. Watch what you're eating, what you're consuming, what you're bringing into your household. Is there structure? Is there community? Is there purpose? Like, think about these things. Do you have to exactly live ancestrally or anything like that? We are in the modern world. We're just trying to bring in different values and tenets that can help you live a more present life and just help you live the way you want to live with your goals. So, Craig, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate you. For the Macro Perspective peeps, show notes, everything in below.